From the English dictionary, gag means choking, as you saw, something that causes the choking. But it also means to prevent or suppress freedom of expression. I know it's early in the morning, and probably some of you still have your breakfast in your stomach, and I hope that wasn't disturbing too much. But the idea is to actually, yes, disturb you. And because gagging really is the expression of this uncomfortable feeling that hopefully you just felt in your body, this tightness that you feel around your throat and the opening of your stomach, which is what you feel when you're just about to vomit. Now, the importance of this feeling is that it really brings us into the body. And I think of recent times, we are forgetting how to be really present within our bodies, which is always offering information to tell us where we are at. The interesting thing about gagging in itself, so this experience, this bodily or embodied experience, is that the tightness actually takes many shapes, and yet is symptomatic of one fundamental condition. Basically, this tightness seems to arise whenever we are suppressing, blocking, constraining, controlling the natural expression of being, whatever the being is. So let me just give you some example, because not only gagging takes multiple forms, but it operates across pretty much all scales. So let's have a look at the microscopic world of molecules and genes. In this context, gagging means controlling the expression of genes, for example, so that their biological function is suppressed. And we have very modern technology that are doing exactly that. One, for example, is RNA interference technology, which literally silence the genes or specific genes. And another technology which you might be familiar because it's quite controversial is the gene use restriction technology, which has given rise to the famous or unfamous terminator seeds. Let's move to a different scale of the organism. And I'm taking two examples which are really close to us, because most of us have pets. And yet, gagging occurs at that level where we're trying to control their behavior, so that really their function is suppressed. With dogs, for example, which we love so much, the practice of debarking and devocalization, I was very shocked to see in some countries, and these are not developing countries, these are modern, westernized countries. These activities are still taking place and they're quite common. And debarking actually is a removal of the vocal cords for the dog, which means that the dog ability to express and communicate naturally is being suppressed. And I would say that it's like depriving the dog of the freedom of bark. But of course, if we take the same concept to the humans, we see that exactly same situation within our own species, where we censor people, we even retaliate, and that can be dangerous when, yeah, we are talking about things that our society doesn't want to hear. And I found it interesting, as I was researching for this, that at least in Australia, and I think in other countries as well, there are laws in place to literally silence people like activists which go into animal farms and try and report some of the abuses that are occurring in these places. And funny enough, these laws are called ag-gag. So literally, they're trying to gag the communication of important information so that the general public doesn't know what is really going on. But as I said, gagging takes multiple forms, and it goes across the microscopic world, the organism level, and all the way up to community and ecosystems. And in this context, the result is just the same. If it is a forest, through deforestation or land clearing, for example, we are losing biodiversity and we are causing desertification. And in a way, this practices are literally controlling the ecosystem in a way that its function is suppressed. And this happens as well underwater. So activities such as reef mining or destructive fishing end up leading the ecosystem exactly in the same place. Loss of biodiversity and desertification, which in this context actually means losing the habitat altogether. So what's really going on? Well, if you just think about some of the examples that I've just given you, and they're just only few of the examples that I could have given you, it seems to me that gagging is a practice of discoloring life into a sort of uniformed, black and white, unidimensional space. Now, the key word here is actually uniformed, because that's not how nature works. That's not how the real world works. Actually, the world and nature thrive on diversity and variation. And even Darwin, with his theory of natural selection, actually, the theory couldn't work if we didn't have variation. So this word already giving us an insight of what's going on and what's wrong here. But I'd just like to clarify, I don't think that gagging in itself is actually the problem. I think it's more like a symptom. And that's why it's important that we really enter and connect with our bodies, because just like when you're sick and you have symptoms and your body is trying to tell you what is going on with your bodily system, the same is happening at this wider scale, where the symptom is just trying to tell us what's going on into our world. And I think this is the symptom of a choice that the choices that we have already made. And it's just a feedback system telling us this is what's happening with those choices. Just choices. We can choose anything. But this one maybe is not a good choice. And so the question is really like, well, what is really the choice that we made? We need to understand what is the choice that we made so that then we can choose something else. And again, if you think of the examples that I just given, I think that it becomes really clear that the choice is about control and interference. But of course, we don't talk about it that way. It's not very cool. Instead, we talk about it in a very cool way, and we use words such as independence. Now, independence, especially in our modern society, has this connotation that is something really positive, really healthy, and is going to lead to freedom. And actually, we thrive towards it so much that we would try to get independence at all costs. Sometimes these are very high costs. But the problem is that actually independence is just a myth. It's a myth because, well, it doesn't really lead you to any freedom. It doesn't really make you healthier or happier. Fundamentally because it implies separation. And this is a paradox because we cannot be possibly separate. We depend on each other every second of every day. So in this situation, independence is actually not the right concept and is not the right approach. But because we don't want separation, we cannot be separate. But I'm also not saying that I support dependence. Dependence is just simply the other side of the same coin. It's got exactly the same problem, it's as dysfunctional as independence, fundamentally because in both situations, the relationship between whether it's you with another human, you with your pet or your animals, you with nature, you with the world, the relationship just is not mutual, is not balanced, is not mutually beneficial. And in both cases, whether independence is looking for control while the dependence is given its power away and so it's out of control, in either ways, you'll end up in the same place, which is this place of separation. And as I said, it's just not how it works. So what can we do? Well, a very wise friend Luhan Matus said, well, life can be a process of observing what we are interfering with rather than interfering with what we are observing. So maybe we just need to stop. We need to stop, we need to observe, we need to listen. Stop trying to control, stop trying to interfere with things. Learn where your place is, and the only way to do this is by stopping, observing, listening. And then I think from that place, we are actually it's going to be very easy to see that this dualistic box, independence, dependence, black, white, either or, is just yet a choice, but we are not stuck with that. There are other options which might be outside this box, which we could access, and it could be exactly the way forward that we are all longing for, looking for, all of those beautiful connections that we all want, the friendship, the intimacy. Maybe those things that are actually the freedom that we are looking for are just outside this dualistic box. So I guess I need to give you an example to provide the framework for this, because how do we get there? And my example actually is not going to come from the animal world. It comes from a world that was here even before the animals, and a world that, for most of us, seems quite silent and passive still, but it's far from that. And it's got very good lessons. In a very humble way, it's got very good lessons to teach us. So I'm just going to let the forest tell us what this other option might look like. And to do that, we have to start from the very beginning, right? And if you can imagine yourself as the seed, you're just this seed embedded in the womb of the earth. You're really comfortable there. It's a good place. Now, in this space, you learn the first two lessons of your life. One lesson comes from the earth itself. And the earth uses as a teaching tool, uses gravity. And it shows you where up and down is. And so that you can grow right and strong and properly. And so the first lesson really that the earth teaches the seed is about space. Then there is a second lesson that comes at the same time. And this lesson comes from the sun. And although as a seed, of course, you're still under the ground, you haven't even seen the sun shining ever yet. Although you have felt the warmth and you know the difference between the day and the night. And this rhythm, you learn it. You record it inside your being. You embody it. So the sun is teaching you about time. Now, so the seed, within just a matter of days, has already learned something that is fundamentally characterizing this reality, the time-space domain. And just for sake of comparison with the human world, Einstein, which was of course obsessed with time-space domain, took about 10 years thinking about it before he was ready to publish his famous theory. But let's go back to the seed. So imagine this domain where you got points of time and space. The distance between those points, which is not necessarily linear, it's that space that we humans call change. And of course, change affects everything in this reality. And so it affects our seeds too. And through change, through growth, the seed suddenly has broken through a different, other, new world full of light. And he has already received, in such a short time, just think about it, in a few days, he has received already so much. He hasn't done anything, he's just receiving. He has received so much from the earth, from the space in which he is, from the sun and the timing of things, that he feels really grateful. And so the first thing that he does when he puts out his first new leaves, he never had leaves before, so that's cool. And he starts doing this new thing, which we call photosynthesis. As soon as those leaves turn green, the first thing that the seed does, I think out of gratitude actually, it gives back in the form of the breath of oxygen that supports all life. And we always forget that, because this seed, which will grow in a plant, in a big tree, will keep giving this gift back, asking for nothing for the entirety of its life. That's generosity, I think. But while this is happening on the surface, of course, there is plenty of stuff. There is always stuff happening under the ground. And of course, to support and nourish itself as the plant is growing, is developing roots which allow to find what it needs as a basic needs. Food and water. For water, it might even be listening out for the sound of a water source and direct its roots towards it. For nutrients as well, it might be actually not doing this job on its own at all. Within no time, it finds himself allied with others. And this relationship, we don't know the exact numbers, but we believe that between 80 and 90% of all plants build this mycorrhizal association, which means that there is an alliance between the roots of plants and fungi. And of course, fungi, totally underestimated. We, as humans, only sort of appreciate them when they show up on the surface with their fruiting bodies. But under the ground, these guys are doing an amazing job. This is probably the very first non-independent, dependent, outside of that dualistic relationship, where we find for the first time a commonly beneficially, mutual beneficial relationship. The plants is providing the fungi with photosynthetic carbon, which support their growth. And in exchange, the fungi are looking for the nutrients that are dispersed in the soil and water, and they're providing the plants with that. And not only that, but they are allowing this new network to expand, and in a way stretching, together with the plants, the capability of communicating with the surrounding. So thanks to this mycorrhizal network, this plant, like our plant, is now be able to connect with the next door neighbor and the one over there, and start exchanging information about what's going on in the neighborhood. This can be information about there is danger, we need to, protect ourselves, or just like all sorts of happenings in the place. In a way, it's, as you can see, it's already the beginning of a small community. Of course, as I said, and we're going to do this, we're going to go underground, above ground, so just bear with me. But as I said, there is always something happening. So while this is happening under the ground, on the surface, the plant is also doing exactly the same job, and it's starting to get aware of who is around and of others. And one of the ways in which it does this, for example, is by using light. Of course, we know plants are really good at capturing light, but they are actually very good as well at detecting darkness. And it is more the relationship between light and darkness that plants are particularly interested in when it comes to communication and when it comes to working out what's happening in their environment. They got specialized pigments which are called phytochromes, and thanks to these pigments, they can detect shifts in the ratio of particular frequency of light. Specifically, they are really interested in the red-far red ratio, and when there are changes in this ratio, the plant knows what's happening in the neighborhood because it's the light that is bouncing and getting transmitted from the leaves of others. And so, for example, this can guide the decision for growth. If someone is growing really fast next to you, maybe you need to change your rhythms so that you don't get overshadowed. But it creates this very dynamic space where everyone is sort of aware of everyone else's. For plants not doing anything and just sitting there as sticks in the ground, I think this is already pretty amazing. But of course, as part of life, as we also know it, life is not all like happy, joy, joy. It's like there is also pain and troubles, right? It's part of the deal. And sometimes this comes in the form of others, and the plants learn this quite quickly as well. And if a plant next to you is getting eaten or attacked by an herbivore, you might be listening again out for the sound of those chewing herbivores on those leaves. And you already know, you learn through experience that that sound is an indication for you who are not under attack yet to prepare and build up your defenses. And you might do exactly the same thing by just sniffing around in your environment. So plants detect the chemicals of a neighbor that is being wounded, and based on those chemicals, they can put up their defenses. And again, you wonder why they would ever do it. And it's like, well, if you imagine that this is a community and all these plants are all interconnected anyway, in some levels, then if there is one plant that is under attack, but by protecting and putting up the defenses of everyone else, you're actually building the defense for the entire area. And so everyone is helping everyone. And then if you are the plant under attack, there is always support. And you just have to call for it. You have to ask for it. And that's exactly what plants do. They send out other chemical volatiles, which are detected by specific insects. And those chemicals are like sort of calls for help. And these insects, and for anybody of you who is a gardener, this would be quite familiar concept. It's like ladybugs are amazing. You want them in your garden because they clean up the mess. They come in and they just remove the troubles and the pain. So support is there. Now, thanks to all of these networking, communicating, exchanging, helping, supporting, nourishing, you flourish. In the case of some plants, you actually literally flower and flourish. And with those flowers, again, with those colors, with those smells, you forge yet new relationships. Some relationships are daytime things. And some colors, for example, are exactly for that purpose. They are directed to the attention of daytime others. In this case, we have a hummingbird interested in pollen. In other cases, the colors are targeting the knife worker. And in some cases, plants are so good, some plants are so amazing, that they would actually change, the same individual will change color from day to night so that it can do double whammy and get the daytime guys and the nighttime guys, shifting colors. In some cases, the color will shift back. This is pretty amazing. Even in the animal world, there are very few examples of, things that they can do this. And then, of course, there are some relationships which have been built over evolutionary time, like a beautiful romantic dance, and they become very intimate. In this case, for example, there are some plants that would only release the pollen if they are vibrated, literally just at the right frequency. And there are some insects which have evolved to do exactly that job. So they will vibrate the abdominal muscle so that the plants can release the pollen. So this really tight, intimate relationship has evolved over time, and it's a very delicate one as well, as all intimacy is. So you started as a little seed, and you learn so much in such a short time, and then you got to express your beauty. That's what you came here for, to just show yourself, the real self. And then it's time to put all of those lessons back into practice. And so it's your time to deliver the next generation. It's your time to deliver the next seed. And so the first lesson that you learned was about gravity, and it is gravity that comes back and helps you to place your seed just in the right place. The second lesson that you learned was about time, and it is the sun that taught you that one. It is about making and doing things just at the perfect timing. And some plants, for example, like this one, you know, they will spread their seeds by literally drying out their pods so that then they explode open, thanks to the collaboration with the sun. And then remember, you were so grateful as a seed that you gave this breath of gratitude. And it is the wind that comes back and helps you to just release that gratitude even further through your seeds. And the water that you were looking through your roots for nourishment, the water comes back and is the system through which some plants deliver again their seeds to new grounds. And of course, how interactive and complex the entire system is, with like relationships that we as humans are not even aware of. Some are more obvious, but the complexity of this relationship is what creates this sense of community. And actually, we often forget, but we are part of that community of relationships. So there is one more step as the seed grown into a fully fledged plant, tree, and you just need to get old and eventually die. But before you do that, you actually give one more gift, and you share all of your wisdom, all of your stories, all of your adventures, all of your experiences, all of the things that you've learned. And in forests like the Canadian forest of the Douglas fir, this happens where the old trees actually, through the collaboration with the mycorrhizal, the mushrooms, are releasing the nutrients back into the forest so that it supports who is left behind. In some cases, those nutrients are funneled to specific others, maybe the younger ones who need that extra help. And just to give you a graphical representation, this is work done by a group up in Canada, and the bubbles of different sizes and different colors are actual real trees. The size of the bubble represents, in relative terms, the diameter of the actual tree in this forest. And so the smaller is a smaller tree, and the bigger bubble is a bigger tree. Now, the color of the bubbles is indicative of the age of that particular tree. So the yellow guys are the really young trees, and the really dark green are the older trees. Now, just to put this into context, let's say that we are the tree that grew to this stage, and we are the one with the arrow pointing. That tree has got 47 connections with other trees of different sizes and ages. So when that tree dies, it's delivering and sharing with at least this number of other trees within a small patch of the forest. The lines, as you can see, represent the connection between the trees. It's pretty complicated. I don't know if my network would be that complex. I think I'll have a few lines, I think. So the point here, I think, that the forest or the plant world is showing is that you can maintain your individuality. The tree that started from the seed is still the same one individual that is going through this beautiful story of a tree. But yet is also part of the whole, as you can see, and is an important part. Is an important part for everyone else's, and it's important for that particular individual to be part of that. This is what interdependence is. I think interdependence is a choice, and is a choice of communion. It's not about being independent or dependent. It's just a different way altogether that is outside that dualistic box. Because that box is what has created the world that we see right now. And obviously, for many of us, we are starting at least to recognize that maybe it's not just right. Maybe it's not what we really want. And then, I guess, something happened for me while I was preparing this talk. So I'm going to share this because this is how it goes. I was struggling, I've been trained as a scientist. I've given many talks, and I've been trained to have the take-home message. Your conclusion is the most important part of your talk, right? And I just couldn't find it. And I was like, there was anxiety. And then I was like, oh no, my time is running out. The organizers are waiting for me to give my files, and I can't because I haven't finished my talk. And then only yesterday, and I had to laugh with myself, I realized that it was not possible to finish it. For me to actually give a conclusion and write it right here, it would have been like closing into the box and separate myself from you and you from me. And I think that this was a good lesson for me to learn that it's like, well, if we are talking about interdependence, it means that we are talking about the space in between, where things emerge and where we both share mutually, beneficially together. So I thought, okay, so I guess we still need to conclude. And I thought, all right, so what it means is that you need to actually allow yourself to enter into that space. I needed you to be able to know what it was that it was needed into this space. So we'll see where we go. I don't actually know exactly, but listening to last night already gave me a couple of ideas, and I think that the key for me to be able to conclude the talk is about the story that the forest has given us. Is it possible that interdependence is not just a choice, but there is something more? It's about an inevitability that is both biological and evolutionary. Is it possible that we have done the seed stage? We have been the babes depending totally from mom and dad. So we've done the dependence phase. And we've taken, because that's what you do. Then is it possible that we have moved just as a natural progression, as a part of this life? We have moved and grown and changed, just like the seed into a seedling. And we have become the adolescent of this time. I'm talking about humanity, not just individuals. Is it possible that, as most of us know what it means to be a teenager, all you want to do is you just want your independence. So you were dependent first, then you want your independence, and you're going to get it at all costs. No matter what mom and dad says, you're going to do it your way. And so you start trying everything. You have to. That's part of the game. You try everything. Some things are good for you, some things not so much, some things are really not good for you. But you have to go through that process because it's part of the learning. I guess the good news is that as part of the inevitable developmental progress, eventually you get out of your teens, and that's good. And you mature like the trees. You mature in an adult. I think this maturity brings a kind of realization that dependence and independence were about one thing, taking. And maybe it's time for you to, instead of take, it's time for you to gratefully receive. And maybe, if you can, also gracefully give back, which is what, the plants have shown from the very beginning. So they're pretty good at getting there. And is it possible that we are not quite there yet? That's why we're still seeing the teenagers' rampage of destructive behavior as well as beautiful creative stuff. And we are naturally moving, as part of our evolution as humanity, into a space where we become the adults. We look after, we respect, we receive and give back. I think in this space, then finally, we might find what the teenager was always looking for, which is the fully fledged self, the one that knows what's needed and it just delivers at the right time, perfect space. So I guess, especially after last night, I was like, well, if I think of our society at the moment, I think that we have mistaken the leadership roles, and we have given it, because we are responsible for what we subscribe to, we are giving it to adolescents, teenagers, which are making a bit of a mess. It's not their fault, they're just teenagers. But I know, and it was really hopeful for me last night, I know that we have a lot of adults already here. So maybe we need to recognize where the real adults are in our society, and they should be the one guiding the teenagers into a place where they can just relax, use this beautiful mind in service of the heart. I don't know if this is our conclusion, but yeah, it was inspiring for me to try. And I did find this quote, which I thought, yeah, I'm going to have this, because I felt good when I read this. So we know well what leads us forward and also what holds us back. We have learned those two now. So we can choose the path that leads to wisdom. The Buddha. Thank you.